Good morning. Actually, it's not morning anymore, is it? It's afternoon. Hello, everyone. Hello. Are we well fed? All right. We are well fed, maybe. Welcome to our first Playdate with Death, faith-filled and life-giving ways to prepare for death. Let's just take a moment before we begin. These aren't easy conversations. First of all, I want to just acknowledge the courage it takes to say yes to participating in the process, the courage it takes to say, yeah, I'm actually going to do this thing that I don't really like talking about, but I'm going to step out of avoidance and into action. So we're going to have fun, as Leah promised. But before we do that, let's just take a moment. Set your feet flat on the floor. Rest your hands in your lap. If you want to, maybe hold your palms facing upward. Maybe just close your eyes. That feels safe. Take a deep breath in. Now let it out. Let's do it one more time. Do you feel your heart open as your lungs expand? Let that breath back out. Let's see if we're ready to receive this blessing. It's called A Blessing for the Courage to Try by Kate Bowler. Blessed are you faced with the impossible, you who do not take your eyes away from what threatens to swallow you whole, you who stare down reality though your heart quickens, you for whom action comes swiftly as you chart the next step or bulldoze a new path yourself. You who know how to turn hope into action. And blessed are you who, when you've come to the end of what is possible, find the courage to live there too. Blessed are we who are learning how to hope and how to let go, when to act and when to stop. Balancing the impossibility of so much love and so much fear together. Amen. All right, so I'm going to hand the mic over to a dear friend and colleague of mine, Leah Schweitz, spelled the same as our very own beloved Lee Matthews, so don't get confused. We have Lee and Leah here. Leah is the founder of Playdates with Death. I first encountered Leah when she was the program director for a fellowship I did, 2 or 3 years ago now? And I was so impressed with the way she kind of jumped into the waters of chaos in that situation and experience. And then she's been on her own personal journey these past few years that has brought her to this work. And when we were talking about maybe putting something together about this, I thought, I got to get Leah here because I'd love for all you people to know her. So thank you for being here. And then Leah, I'll let you introduce George and all that.
Thank you. I'm going to put this one over here, like this, for a minute. It's going to stay. All right. So welcome, everybody. This is exactly how we start Playdates, with that kind of grounding, centering moment. I'm going to also invite you, before we really jump in, to add to that grounding, centering moment just a hiccup of space to include, bring in, wrap in anyone who might be making it possible for you to be here today. The beauty of being in a church is that includes all of the choir of witnesses that are part of being part of this church. It's the body of Christ, right? It's the family, friends, pets, neighbors, right? All the people, places, and creatures that have formed us and brought us and allowed us to be in this space. So I'm going to ask you to hold them, draw them in, invite them in for just a moment and hold them with some gratitude as we get started. So it's not really just our work, right? This work that we're going to do together is really expansive in all these ways. So for just a moment, we'll invite in with gratitude all of those who are helping make it possible for us to be here. Maybe you can join me with a thanks be to God. Thanks be to God. This one. One of the fun things about being on this side of that is you don't get to see the little smiles that come across on the faces of everyone. It's really delightful. So with that, I'm going to ask if George, you want to come join me up at the front here for some introductions to what we're up to and who we are, and we'll get started that way. I snagged a picture on the internet of you that I didn't run by him.
I get better looking every day, so that's cool.
So we'll see how you feel about this one. So just as a warning, that's coming up. So I'm Leah Schweitz. Part of my story in the last 2 years, 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, which, friends, that's a pretty serious diagnosis. And at the time, one of my care providers shook their finger at me and said, "You've got to get your affairs in order." And I did absolutely nothing when he said that, because fear and shame are really terrible motivators for getting things done. They will let you get things done, as we've heard already today, right? They'll let you get things done, but it is a really hard place to do really hard things. And I felt like I had to do it by myself. So to go out and do this work by myself, I was also in the process of getting divorced. So all of the things were also kind of in upheaval. So it was a lot of work. It was very overwhelming. I was totally afraid and ashamed all at the same time. And so I did nothing for a long time. Well, that's not true. I was healing from cancer. I was doing quite a lot at the time. But I was on this journey with cancer, and I was not getting affairs together at all. Come October, my, at the time 9-year-old was going to go trick-or-treating. He went upstairs with his buddy and came down in this Among Us costume. And then his buddy came down in this Grim Reaper costume. And I'd had the Grim Reaper in my entryway, people. He was standing right there. And it was just so hilarious and absurd and weird and joyful and terrifying all at the same time, as life often is. I was like, okay, you're having a play date with death. We have been on this long play date with death. We've been on this long play date with death. And that's where the name came from, was this play date with death that my son accidentally brought into our entryway. And shortly after that, in October, I was like, okay, this is the way I need to attend to getting my affairs to order. It's got to be more playful, and it's got to be a play date. So I started inviting some friends to join me online to do the work together, and they said yes. I was like, okay, there's something here. If there's more than just me who wants to do this work in community together in a way that's different than one that's based on fear and shame. So how is it we can do that work together? And that's how Playdates got started. We started having Playdates in December. I mean, nobody has time for this, right? So we did a couple there, and then Playdates with Death was launched in February. My sort of biography, pre-cancer diagnosis, I was a seminary professor and directed the Zygon Center for 10 years. The Zygon Center does religion and science work. And so really, I have been doing religion and science work and helping folks through the hardest conversations, the big questions, my whole professional life. So the cancer diagnosis showed up and opened up this space, but it really feels like an expression of call that I have been professionally on my whole life. So it's really, for me, a great blessing and a gift to be able to do this work of call with you all. And I've also seen the power of what can happen for families when we do this work. So that's a little bit about me and who I am and how I got to do this work and how we ended up with this wacky title, Playdates with Death. And part of the joy of doing this work is that I get to meet all kinds of great expert new friends, including the estate attorney that I have that we've got to join us today. So George, if you want to say one or two things about, this is the picture that I found.
Oh,
does that look good? Yeah.
So my name is George Bischoff. I used to be in a firm called Bischoff & Bischoff, but that doesn't really say anything about what I do, so I changed it to the Wills & Trust firm. I've been doing that about 20 years. I was earlier in my life a tax attorney, and I had studied philosophy before that. I live in Lower Westchester. I have a wife and 2 kids, and 7 minutes ago they were 7 pounds, and they get taller and heavier every year. They're now 23 and 21. So, you know, my work is very grounded in families and individuals and life's journey. I enjoy that very much. It's rewarding to answer people's questions, occasionally to have some fairly difficult conversations, in a loving way, all in a day's work. Anyway, I really enjoy talking about this. I'm very excited about the opportunity. Let's see where it goes.
Thanks. So just a bit about how we play. So what these play dates, how we do this work together. It's intended to be a shame-free, judgment-free, guilt-free, overwhelm-free, anxiety-free, fear-free, meanness-free space. That's what it's intended to be. And that doesn't mean just towards each other, it also means to yourself, right? So for yourself, I can't tell you how many times I have said, oh, I'm doing this Playdates with Death, and somebody is like, I know I need to. I haven't done it. It's like, no shame here. This is what we're all here in this together to get it done together. So it's really meant to be that kind of space. You have permission to feel all the big feelings that come along with this. You have that permission. And that said, I'm not a therapist or a counselor or an attorney or a tax planner. I'm none of those things. We can get those folks if you need them. So we have access to resources, but I'm not those things. It's not that kind of space. We really are going to try to get some things done together, okay? So we're going to try and really, by the end, you might not have a will or a power of attorney, but you're going to hopefully feel empowered to know what to do next to get it done. So that's really what we're after here. And you can't do this wrong. It is already a win that you are here. That is cause for celebration, friends. The way we also play is there will be memes. There will be an invitation for dancing at the end because you got to shake it out. You don't have to, but you are encouraged, highly encouraged, to dance it out at the end. Again, these are all part of the tricks for how it is we keep our nervous system turned down in a really big space like this. Everything is an experiment and an invitation, right? So you can pass, you can always pass if you're not in the space to be able to do the work that we're asking. I think that's what I want to say about how we play. So today, the plan here is we're going to do one small activity for writing ourselves some permission slips to get us going. And then we're going to start the hard practice about talking about death in a death cafe style. So we'll get a little chance to practice, do that work of practice, because it's really the key, friends. Even if you get all of your things done, all of your stuff in order, but you haven't told anybody or talked to anybody about it, the work goes for naught. So it really, the skill, the practice of having these conversations is part of the skill base that we're trying to build. So we're going to do just that as a way to get started today, and then we'll really jump into these big three, the powers of attorney, medical directives, and wills and trusts. And as I said, at the end, there will be the invitation for some dancing. All right. So with that, to get us started, just as a way to get you grounded, actually, I'm not going to take my mic off, so Pastor Andrea is going to pass around slips. And the invitation here, we're just going to take a minute for you to think about what you need for yourself to be able to do the work. I think I stole this from Brene Brown, actually, so I should give credit where this is. I'm pretty sure she does an exercise like this. So if you just want to take one of these, this is just for you. This one you're not going to be asked to share. You can take it. We've got pens as well, so if you need a pen, there's a basket with pens. Thank you to all the passer-outers. This is just to give yourself permission to feel sad, feel scared, permission to do it imperfectly, permission to take it in small chunks, permission to ask for help, permission to let it feel uncomfortable. So everybody comes into these conversations with resistance in some way, right? And this is just a chance to put that resistance on the page and say, I'm going to do it anyways. I'm going to do it anyways. So what's going to get in my way? I have permission to see it, to name it, and then to do it anyways. Right? So for me, I have permission to do it afraid. I have permission to feel afraid and do it anyways. I don't like to do things imperfectly, so I have permission to do it imperfectly and do it anyways. I have permission to do it differently than my sister would want to do it. I have permission to disagree with my partner. There's lots of ways that this space can cause some tension. So I'm going to be quiet and give you a minute to think and do that. All right, give me one more minute to finish this part up. So it can feel very empowering to speak it. So if you would want to speak it into the room, this is an invitation, a very low pressure, no pressure invitation. If you want to name your permission spoken into the room, you're invited, welcome to do that, but nobody is required. No requirements on that one. Yeah?
Of course.
I'm giving myself permission to make decisions even if I can't possibly know every single outcome of those decisions.
Mine is, I have permission to not know, to be flexible, and to change my mind in this journey towards death.
Thank you. Yep.
I have permission to do it the way I feel it needs to be done in that moment. I have permission to take care of myself and to take care of Ron, however, the best I can.
Thank you.
I have permission to be untimely, slow to act, and confused.
I give myself permission to talk to others about death and what I expect.
I'm giving myself permission to let this be the unrehearsed thing that it is, and to be okay if I don't have everyone's questions answered, and if some people leave more confused than they arrived.
Thank you. Thank you. One another's permission helps us, right, in our own permission giving too, I think. So thank you to those who are willing to share. We much appreciate that. We're going to pass around 2 more things to get started, and while we're doing that, I will have an invitation for you. Okay, so the 2 things that we're going to pass around, these, I would like these back. So there's a very lovely little product called the Death Deck, and it's got this whole set of cards and questions that are all over the map. So I would say if you could take 1 or 2, in case you get one you don't want to answer, right? And your neighbor will have a couple. Take 1 or 2. We're going to pass these around. Take 1 or 2. Again, I would like these back, please. The Death Deck is these really lovely questions, and we're just going to spend a couple minutes with these questions. They also have one that's called the End of Life Deck, and those questions are a little softer, gentler, maybe not so like, I don't know, saucy. They're meant for folks who are in hospice spaces, for instance. So the Death Deck is really questions for folks who are planning for death, but maybe it's not quite so close. The End of Life Deck is meant for folks who are in hospice or maybe a little closer and would benefit from a little softer set of questions. So you've got a question, and as you are reading the questions, I'm going to ask that you take a minute and find a neighbor or 2 or 3 and have a chat, just a short chat. You'll find versions of what we're doing right now in this little moment in lots of places. They're called death cafes. Sorry, that's not what right, so we're doing a little mini death cafe. And so if you want other ways to practice conversations like this, you can usually find them. Sometimes libraries have them, but that's another great way to keep practicing. So if you could find a couple nearby to have a chat, talk through your questions. We'll do this for about 7 minutes. And then we'll turn to the business at hand.
We'll return stragglers to you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
seems like everyone's here for the show. It seems like
Yeah, which is great. Do you want to say like a dedicated kind of like introduction to like cars guitar roles and trusts and stuff, and then start things on each hour? Do that kind of, can you give it an introduction?
happy to, sure.
Okay, that'd be great.
And I very much take the cues from you.
Okay.
Do anything. So
Excellent. I think that there really is like a full range
that's what's
of folks here, so like having that initial like, okay, just what are we talking about here? Would be great. And I have printed the advanced directives, just a couple of samples of those. Great. Some samples of what that kind of thing looks like from that hearing. These are the kinds of questions.
interesting.
Yeah. Like a whole mix of that kind of thing.
D all of the above.
All right, we'll take 2 more minutes, friends. Oh, this is the. This is the flow chart that I'm going to have for folks. And then the back has a checklist. I know it's too tiny, sorry. Part of the astronaut folks to have really very tangible, like the flow of things.
You know what might go in these categories? Are you familiar with freewill.com? It's run by maybe St. Jude's and a couple other major charities.
Oh, yeah.
And it's literally free.
Yeah.
And like every 3 steps are like, would you like to make a gift to the Shriners, right? So it's an advertising driven
Yeah,
thing.
sure.
It's not bad.
Oh, good. Feel free to add. Yeah, that's great. And then on the back, there's the list of a start. Okay, friends, these are the kinds of conversations that could go on and on and on. But I'm going to pull us back together here. I'm going to try. I have a bell if I need to, but I thought, if I don't have to.
No laughing.
If I don't have to. I know, it's good, it's good. That's exactly what we want. That's what we want. All right, friends, so that was the little mini Death Cafe, taste of some of the questions out of the Death Deck, and really it's just a practice of us getting more and more comfortable having these conversations, having conversations about death. This is a picture of me. I'm actually wearing the very same boots as I am in that picture, but this is at the gravesite of my dad. That's a really fun story about how I ended up at this gravesite this day. I'll save that for another time. But not everybody has this relationship with cemeteries and a kind of a comfort with talking about death, with being in the presence of it. And it's one of the skills and capacities that we're trying to grow and expand in these Playdate times, is just the ways, capacities to be able to have these hard conversations with people that you care about, with people that you love and care about. So that's part of what we're doing here. So with that, we are going to explicitly now turn to the big three, as I have called them, the powers of attorney, advance directives, and wills and trusts. I kind of group those in one clump. And as a way to do a first pass, in case we needed a meme first, it says, it's the Reaper, right? I've lived across all time. I've seen things mortals could only barely imagine, but I've never seen this. It's just celery dipped in peanut butter. So gross. The beauty of doing Playdates with death is there are so many great memes to be had. More of these will be coming. This is the only one for today, but they're so fun. They're all over the place. It's such good stuff. All right, so these are the big three that I have said. Advanced directives, power of attorney, wills and trusts. And if you want more incentive about why to get this done, here's how my power of attorney got done. My palliative care doctor came into my infusion suite with my sister. My sister has come with me. One of the great gifts of my cancer diagnosis has been a new relationship with my sister. She has been with me for almost all of my treatments. She comes to all of them. She's my go-to person. She does not let me go down the internet rabbit hole. She does that for me. It's really been a great gift. But she knows, my sister's in the know. She gets it. And so my palliative care doctor came in, who's also been kind of in the know of things, and she said, so your divorce is final, right? And I said, yep. She's like, that means your mother makes all your decisions now if something happens. And my sister and I look at each other, and I love my mother dearly. She is a big fan and supporter, but she has not been in the room with me. She does not have a sense of the kinds of decisions that I would want. And so she was quite right to say, let's get one of these done so that my sister would be the one to make the decision, because there's a default system of deciders, right? There's a default order of deciders. And in New York, that default order is, it's first your spouse, then it's your grown children, and then it's your grandchildren, and then it's your parents and your siblings. So whoever is next in line will be the default decider for you unless you have these in place. And my sister has an adult son who she also was like, oh, he will be the one to be the decider. So that was a very effective palliative care stop with my provider that day. But it's to say this is really important work, because there's this system of default deciders that will happen if you don't lay out and get written and communicate who it is that you want to make those decisions. All right, so with that, now we're going to get a lovely little introduction to these big three by one who really knows. So George, that's your cue if you can help us on these big three.
Thank you. Just a couple questions, not meant to single anybody out, or just to get a feel of the room. Anybody have a will? Power of attorney, healthcare proxy? Anybody have an appointment of agent to control disposition of remains? Put that on the list. It's my favorite name for a document. My least favorite name for a document is a living will, because it ain't a will and it ain't about being alive. The will is the one you probably know best, right? A will does two things. It says who gets what, and it says who does what, right? Caring for a minor child, what we call a guardian in New York, an executor to sue the dude that ran you over, deal with your landlord, collect your deferred comp, settle the lawsuit from when you sideswiped somebody. So a will is a very important document. It's the most formal of these. In most states, certainly in New York, it needs to be in writing. There's some formality of execution, witnesses. A good will have alongside it an affidavit that says everybody was paying attention, no one was drunk, there was no compulsion. That requires a notary, although the will itself does not. And a good will, in that judgmental way, is going to consider some possibilities that you may not, right? A robust will think about, different possibilities. You got 2 kids, you might have 3, you might have 1 when the time comes, right? People say, well, I don't even have a uterus. I'm surgically sterile, right? But you could marry someone that has a fabulous child that you then adopt. You might fly to another country and come back with a baby. Until not so long ago, you could do that. I'm being a little playful, but all kinds of possibilities. And so a will is going to be a document that says to the pharaoh, the king, the state, the tax department, your landlord, all kinds of people, how it should go down. And they may not honor that, but it'll be your chance to make some decisions about what should happen with your property and your relationships with other people in capitalism and in the world. We are in the world, hopefully of it, but not conform to it. And a will does those things. And then also names some people, executor, guardian, trustee, to do the thing. So a will's important, right? You're going to leave us someday, and there will be people left behind. And even if it's not someone you love, again, your landlord, your employer, the tax man. But sometimes you get hit by the bus and you don't die, right? I will share with you, I'm a little rattled because on my way down, I was making perfect time. I love to be early. And lo and behold, there in the middle lane of the Henry Hudson Parkway southbound was just a tangled mess of steel. 2 people had just had an accident. There were no police had not come. It just happened. I was delayed for a couple minutes. But it was a little wink from whoever's out there that, things can happen at any time. But sometimes you're in a situation like that, and now you're incapacitated, or you're hospitalized, or some other issue may go down, and you're not dead, but you're not able to make your own decisions either. And that's where these other documents come in, what we sometimes call advance directives, because you do them in advance of need. So a will is like that in some sense, but when we talk about an advance directive, normally we're talking about power of attorney, healthcare proxy, a living will, appointment of agent, different things. And the vocabulary here, unfortunately, is tough, right? Because it varies state to state. Some people use their own personal vocabulary differently. Some attorneys talk about it differently. Some states call the healthcare proxy the medical power of attorney. Some people call a power of attorney a durable power of attorney, or a general power of attorney, or spring power of attorney. Not to go too far down, I'm not giving anyone continuing legal ed credit, but as my mission is, let me tell you a little bit about what each of those things is. The power of attorney is the one where you should think about legal, financial, commercial. Who's going to sign your name? You might be in the middle of buying a ski condo in Vermont. You might be in the middle of selling your house. You might be settling a lawsuit or making some other important financial legal decision that needs to get dealt with on a timely basis, right? And that gives some other person the power to sign your name in the world of legal things, financial, commercial things. That person has to do it with a duty for your care and to protect your interests. Sometimes there are loopholes to that. My wife, who is my agent under my power of attorney, has the power to give herself gifts, even my children, and that might be good for tax reasons or just because they've gotten good grades and should get a bicycle. So the power of attorney is one to think about where you're giving someone else the power to sign your name if you cannot. And that's a good thing to have. It's a very powerful document. It is on some level a blank check, right? They can empty your bank account. If they do that, and they shouldn't, You can hop up and go sue them, and they might go to jail, but better to be thoughtful about that on the front end, right? So that's a document you want, but you want to be careful with that. The healthcare proxy, a proxy is a person who acts for another, right? The healthcare proxy is an appointment of someone else to make a medical decision for you. It can have some substantive care decisions. I really don't like orange-flavored, aspirin. But typically, it really just says, who's going to make this decision? I'll be straight up with you. I'm slightly cynical about government and power. The healthcare proxy is, among other things, really for the doctor's benefit. It tells the doctor whom to turn to and ask a question between the two sisters, right? Or between, the mom and the dad. You do a power of attorney, you're 21, you're at Vanderbilt, you name your mom and then your dad. The doctor should ask your mother first and then your father, right? So it's something that protects authority as well. I mean, the main thing it does is memorialize your choices, who should act for you. And sometimes that's not so obvious. I'll give you a little hint in terms of how to make that decision. What I like to tell people is, you want someone who's got a steady hand at the tiller, right? They do not need to be anyone with any medical knowledge. You want someone who can look the doctor in the eye and say, Dr. Smith, what would you do if it were your mother? And then he or she may say, for my money, I'd get her out of here. Like, I'd have her airlifted right to Mount Sinai. So that's a way to think about that document. And there's no crypto code in there. That's something you want to make publicly available. Have it in your medical file, right? You show up in the emergency room, like they go through your wallet. Oh, here's the insurance card. We're getting paid on this one. That's good, right? They call the insurance company. They call your doctor. Top of the pile. Dude's O positive, allergic to penicillin, diabetic. Oh, and call this woman, Jane Smith, looks like it's his wife. Here's her mobile number. That's a good thing, right? The living will is really not about either of those things, as I joked a moment ago. It's the one that says, if I'm not going to be around by sundown and the doctor is left to go play golf because nothing he can do, and then the insurance guy wants to stick me in the machine that goes ping, I don't need that, right? If it prolongs my death with useless care, no thanks. Not everyone says that. There are some real philosophical and religious reasons to always be open to care. And, notwithstanding my flippant nature, I respect that. I think a lot of this, the duty of when you're a drafter like me is to honor people's choices. And that's one, and not everyone does that, right? But we call that the living will, which I think is a ridiculous name for it. My favorite name, the appointment of agent to control disposition of remains. That's one where you're cooling to room temperature in the hospital morgue, and your 3 children are rushing to pick you up, the devout Buddhist, the observant Jew, and the practicing Roman Catholic, and those are all very different outcomes for a newly deceased person. And so it's a way to say, here's who's in charge, and here's what I want. Near my God to thee, petunias, no chrysanthemums, and do not invite Uncle Bob, right? Again, being a little playful about these things, it's a way to kind of talk about them. So I've named 4. The big 2, though, out of the advanced directives are the healthcare proxy and the power of attorney. I could do this all day, so I won't, but back to you.
Yeah. I think maybe now we'll pause and ask if there are questions percolating. And while we're doing that, I have some goodies. In particular, we've got a set of advanced directives, so you can see what one of those is. That we've got samples, not a sample. So if you want to see what, I'm sorry, Andrea, I took those over here. I relocated them. Clunk. All right, so these are the samples. So not everybody probably would need one of these, and we can pass those. That is a one for everyone. And then there's a second handout that's one for everyone, and we'll get to that. So hold that for a moment. But if there are questions that got raised in that really first rough pass overview, 30,000 foot, yeah, I think, do you mind walking and sharing the mic?
Can do.
Thank you. Just a two-part question. The name of that last document, the disposition of remains thing, and then my question is, are those things that could also be in your will, or reserved for this fourth long-named document?
Great question, and you answered the first part yourself, disposition of remains. So agent for disposition, I call it the AACDR, the appointment of agent to control disposition of remains. And like the power of attorney, like the healthcare proxy, not a crazy thing to download from the web. If you have questions about it or pick up from the public library, not a bad place to start. It's not unlike the Internal Revenue Service Form 1040. You can get that anywhere. Should you do it alone? Maybe yeah, maybe no. And then the other part of your question is a really good one to touch on, right? Which is a kind of overall observation that your will does not have any legal force or effect until it goes through probate, right? So your angry mother says, this is what we're going to do, open casket, full mass, the whole nine. Your will says, no service, don't invite Uncle Bob. That will has no legal effect until it's probated, which may take weeks or months. If you're in Kings County, years maybe, with all good love to our Brooklynites. And so part of the function of the advance directives is to be effective immediately, right? So someone in the situation of the disposition of remains, that's an immediate issue. You don't even need to ask whether someone has a will or not. If that document is handy, then it'll be effective right then. And the same thing with the power of attorney and the healthcare proxy. You want that in someone's phone as a PDF when you show up, you know, at Cook County Memorial Hospital in Chicago at 2 a.m. So, yeah. I am not keeping track of the order of hands up, so the more vigorously you shake your hand.
This is actually a direct follow-up to what you were just saying. Besides the will, all of these other documents we need to create and then distribute to people because you can't carry these things on you at all times, right?
Lawyer's answer, it depends. The question was, you know, do you have to have the stuff with you at all times? The answer is, it's not crazy, but it's always a balancing. The power of attorney is very powerful. Don't carry that around lest it get picked up and used by someone who's naughty. I like to say that you have to strike a balance between how likely it is these things happen and whom you've appointed and where this stuff should live. For many of my clients who are, like me, semi-adult children and all have phones that have text and email, you know, send them an email and say, listen, in case of emergency break glass, our attorney, Joe Smith, has my docs. And, you know, so that really varies. And it's a great question to ask your attorney. All right, I've done this good work. Where do I keep this? If you are 81 and your children are, you know, 51 and 53 and they pay your Con Ed bill anyhow, give them everything, right? If you are 33 and you happen to have a brother who's the man for the job but not always on point, maybe you don't let him know how it's going to go down. So that's something to kind of noodle on.
Yeah.
This is not what I do well.
Could you say more about disposition of remains relative to the big three?
You know, it really depends. I give clients a binder that have all these things as photocopies and then they're all, you know, as a PDF on a flash drive. You know, yeah, I'm being a little flip here. You just don't know how you're going to go. Some people have a long course of descent, and then all the stuff is very much in place. Some people kind of come off the West Side Highway like the dude, you know, I saw an hour ago. Nobody's killed in that accident, but it can happen very quickly. So it's tough to answer how closely you want to keep that emergency stuff. Well, you know, the appointment of agent for disposition of remains is after you're dead, so that's, you know, not as important as the healthcare proxy or the living will or the power of attorney, which are emergency documents. So, you know, what would you put on the refrigerator that the babysitter could see? Some things yes, some things no, right?
I have some personal experience with the usefulness of some of these documents. When my parents had all of these in order, and they named each other first, and then my sisters and I as second. And when my father died about 10 years ago, my mother wasn't capable of making decisions. And so, my sisters and I, of course, stepped in to do all that. And they had some insurance policies, a policy if you get cancer, a policy if you had heart problems, and those were both conditions that had affected my father. And I was able to file for claims relatively easy. None of this is easy, but relatively easily because I had the power of attorney. And one of the things they needed were some medical records. Well, because of the living will and the power of attorney, I was able to just write to the doctor, say, I need these records, and send those copies and could get them right away. And so it made that process much, much easier. And then some years later, when my mother, who was still incapacitated, had broken her hip and had some hospitalization policy, same thing. Because we had those documents, it was much easier to file claims under these extra insurance policies. So they were quite useful.
That's a great share. Thank you.
This is actually, we are live streaming right now, and so Mary McMurtry in Las Vegas wants to know, is a living will the same as a do not resuscitate, a DNR?
Fabulous question. Is a living will the same as a DNR? No, they're a little different. The living will has the flavor of, I'm going to be gone by sundown, and there's nothing I can do about it, and everybody knows that. The doctor here agrees with that, and you can't do anything to help me, so don't stick me in the machine that goes ping. The do not resuscitate contemplates the possibility of resuscitation and recovery. And the example I use on that, and I apologize, it's a little grim, is, the dude at Memorial Day gets a diagnosis, and he's not going to make it past Labor Day. He's got 90 days, right? And so he does a DNR, and he says, listen, I'm going to the hospital, I'm going to play cribbage with my grandson, I'm going to write some thank you notes, I'm going to make amends to my ex-girlfriends. And in the meantime, if I have a heart attack, no need to resuscitate me, even though that would bring me back to play cribbage with my grandson, because I don't want to spend the last 30 days with 3 broken ribs. Right? So the DNR is typically admission specific, and it contemplates that there's a helpful thing under the Hippocratic Oath that a doctor or a caregiver could do, and you are affirmatively saying, no, even that restorative, healthful, medical thing, don't do that, because I have this larger issue present. Were there questions over here? Working my way back.
Can I give the power of attorney to my 3 children, or I need to pick one?
Excellent question. Can a power of attorney appoint 3 children or just 1? How many people do you want running your startup? How many babysitters do your kids need? The answer is yes, you can make a joint appointment. There are good reasons to do that. Sometimes we like 2 smart heads. 2 heads are better than 1. Sometimes we like unity of decision making. In New York, if you appoint 2 children, Jack and Jill, as agents, you can say, they must act together. There must be, unanimity. Or you can say either one can act separately. So one can deal with the medical bills, the other one can deal with collecting the rent from the tenants. So that's very, situation specific, and it depends upon who your agents are. But you can make a joint appointment. You cannot, for reasons I cannot explain, make a joint appointment on a healthcare proxy. I guess because the doctor needs to know whom to ask. But great question about joint appointments. And you can also make successive appointments. My brother Manny, otherwise Mo, otherwise Jack, right? So great question. Hello.
If you had these documents created out of state, and now live in New York, which ones are transferable and can be executed in New York versus which ones need to be created again?
Excellent question. How mobile are these documents, and when do you have to do them again? I would put it this way. Under our federal system of full faith and credit, these documents should be good in all 50 states. The less formal the document is, the less likely that some other jurisdiction would honor it. right? So a will, power of attorney, those tend to be recognized elsewhere. A will is good in most kind of treaty-observing countries in the world, maybe not the rogue states. So if you move to Texas, all your documents are good. But as soon as you figured out where Home Depot and Trader Joe's are, and you met your neighbors, I would probably redo the power of attorney and the healthcare proxy sooner than later, even if your main plans are unchanged, because when you show up in the emergency room or you're trying to deal with something at the bank, it's helpful for those people to recognize a local document. A New York document is good in Chicago, Seattle, LA, but it's always nice to have a local document because, being a little ageist here, I'm 57. If you show up to the bank with a power of attorney from 2015 to a 23-year-old bank teller, that might as well be the Eisenhower administration, right? Like, it's an ancient document to people in their 20s, which is not because they're not wise or good, but it's a framing issue, right? And part of the game here is to make it as easy as you can for people to do the things you want them to do. How are we doing on time? Good for more questions?
Yeah, we've got another one in the back for sure.
All right, fantastic.
My question is whether you should name multiple people, because if you're all of the same age range, you can't necessarily depend on who you choose to be alive when you need them.
Right, one of the considerations on naming people is should you have a range of ages? And again, it depends, right? That's an issue of sort of how long do you think they'll be around? How long do you think they will have capacity to make decisions? And that goes both ways, right? You can say, my father and mother, as long as it's both of them, and only one of them if they're under 70. You can get super technical. You could say my son can be the executor, but only if he's turned 30, right? So definitely wise to take people's ages into account. But the flip side of that, right, is that you can also update your documents. So people say, my parents, I want them to be the guardian of my child, but they're not going to be around forever. And I'll say, well, we'll make them your choices, and when they become frail or not able to juggle a 7 and a 5-year-old, update the documents, which you can't count on always being able to update your documents, but it's a thing to kind of factor in as you think, who am I going to name? All righty. Oh, here we go.
Thanks for all this. So our question on the will has always been around guardianship, so you kind of touched on it a little bit. How technical or that sort of thing around like having multiple options for guardians and things like that?
I would encourage people to sort of think about what they want, right? You can draft a will that says, so the guardian for my 9-year-old should be my brother in Dallas, but only if he's willing to move to New York. And if he won't do that, then it's my sister in Calgary, but she must take the children to church every Sunday, 48 times a year, except when they're in Nantucket, and things like that. Whom would you want to rear your children? I mean, being a little funny, but it's flipped. It was traditional that people would say, this person's the guardian, and they must raise the child in the faith, and some people still do that, right? And I've had people who say, I really want my kid exposed to athletics. I really want them to, have an active lifestyle that appreciates the arts, right? And so it's a little bit of kind of layer in as much as you'd like. One more kind of funny thing, and then on to questions more. It's deeply personal, and the courts get that. I mean, some judges don't always color in the lines, and there's good and bad people in every profession, but most judges really they don't want your kid in their living room. They're really trying to find the right answer. So I think the more guidance you give on that, you'll happier you'll be. I've had people say, listen, blood is thick in the water. My brother is, currently in Antarctica. He gets the kid. And I have other people who say, my kid, it's a pretty good school. If it's not my brother or my sister, it's the mailman, because I really like rye schools, right? And that's your call.
I had two questions. The first was about a POA at a distance, or should they be appointed closer to home? And the second question was, will you be covering lawyer as executor?
Sure. In terms of what I'll phrase as the geography piece of whom should you appoint, again, it depends, right? Anybody been into a bank lately, right? You probably bank online. Your brother in Chicago can also bank online, right? If you need to go physically, maybe with a side piece in your holster to collect rents, don't assign that to someone in Seattle. I mean, it really depends upon the job. In my experience, people who are the executor piece and some of the other roles are not very geographic specific. I mean, even if you have to sell an apartment in New York, they come over from London to interview 3 listing agents and then, supervise the cleaning, go to the service. So the framing I like for picking any kind of appointment is you're putting on a play. Macbeth, Moulin Jr., Lion King, is it in the church basement, is it in the school auditorium? Who's gonna make it great for the audience? Like who can play the role? And that'll depend upon what you got and who's, in the play. Oh, and you had asked, I'm sorry, about the executor as an agent. It's not crazy. I occasionally get asked. I sometimes say yes. For some people, it's a fair ask, but no attorney is obligated to do that. But it's certainly not inappropriate. Interestingly, most financial advisors and accountants cannot serve as an executor or an agent except for their own family. So there are all kinds of rules. But if you have a relationship with an advisor or a friend, for that, your tennis partner, take it into consideration and see what they say.
Will you be talking about trusts and when to set up a trust? And
Sure,
what
I can.
makes sense for
That was my question too.
Want to follow my conductor
I thought that
here.
might be the next slide. I don't know.
Yep, that was it was coming up. Yes. Yes, please.
You want to talk about that now, or?
Let's do. I think so. Yes, this is the moment.
Okay. Trusts are the worst thing in terms of vocabulary, right? Because a trust is like a corporation. What's a corporation? Is it something you formed last week with the state of New York for $250 to hold a brownstone? Maybe. Is it the General Motors Corporation? Maybe, right? So trusts come in all shapes, sizes, and flavors. What we're talking about, I think, in this conversation is mostly 2 kinds of trusts. There's what I'll call the testamentary trust, and any plan you do, if you need one, will have that, right? In trust for my 15-year-old, things she needs, soccer camp, after she turns 18, whatever she needs. When she turns 25, give her half. When she turns 30, give her the other half. Don't give her anything if she's had a crisis of mental health or is otherwise severely physically disabled. If she is starting the next Google and needs her last $1 million to her IPO, give it to her, right? So a testamentary trust is a trust that gets set up in your will or in your lifetime trust to care for another who's come after you, right? So in the common example there is minor children. Might be your mother-in-law, might be your own mother, right? Your own mother is on Medicaid. Don't give her any money. Medicaid will just take it. But if she wants money for physical therapy, better room, better food, visits from her friends, supplemental needs trust, that's a trust you might do in your will, right? The other thing I was talking about is when your main document, your dispositive, who does what, who gets what, is not just a will, but a combination of what we call a pour-over will alongside a living trust. So I'm George, I got a will, I've been fighting with my wife about redoing and updating our plans so that we have both a living will and a family trust, the Bischoff Family Trust. Called a living will because you create it while you're alive, right? So if you like your Latin, an inter vivos trust. And I can tear that up, amend it, revoke it. Sometimes I'm called a revocable trust. All different kinds of names. Living trust, lifetime trust. And that's a situation where I take the George money and I put it into the George Bischoff Lifetime Trust. And I'm the beneficiary, and I'm the trustee. And I can use my money for Taylor Swift tickets, blackjack, cocaine, whatever I want. There's no asset protection. There's no tax benefit. And you say, George, why would you do that? Why would you create an extra piece of paper that you can spend the money and there's no tax benefit and there's no asset protection benefit? What's the point? Well, the answer is that if I have my $1 million in the George Bischoff Lifetime Trust and I get sick, My good-looking wife, Kristen, doesn't need to use a power of attorney for that particular bucket of money, because she can go into the bank and say, hey, I'm the successor trustee, or I'm the co-trustee. I need, $500,000. And they'll say, well, this is fabulous. You're right here on the trust. You can have it right now. You can still get it with a power of attorney. It's a little easier, faster, simpler to do it if the money's in a trust. The other good thing about a trust, well, there are many good things. Another one, though, is that any asset that's in a trust doesn't have to go through probate, right? Now, probate in New York is not the end of the world. It's not California. It's not Florida. Nobody's going to starve. But it's a nice thing to avoid if you can. So I fall off the roof. I'm out doing the shingle gutter cleaning thing. I die. My wife goes to the bank, tells them that she's now the successor trustee, the George Bischoff Lifetime Trust, which is now irrevocable, and it's for her and my children, new beneficiaries, because I'm dead. But she can make the deposit on my memorial service that afternoon. If she's got to cut a tuition check, she can do it the day I die. So that's the main takeaway on trusts. They're a way of holding money that is a little easier to access if you become incapacitated, and in most cases will avoid or bypass probate. And so those are two big advantages. Was there more on that you thought I should hit?
I'm just going to add that that was part of how I ended up with a trust. You don't have to have, it's not in a mechanism that you need scads and billions of dollars, right? It can hold life insurance policies and mortgage, real estate, like the things of your accumulated life. And for me, with a cancer diagnosis, my ex is a successor trustee so that my kids would have access to that money much more quickly. And that was the reason that I ended up with a trust as well. So for that same set of decision factors.
I like to use a car metaphor. A will is sort of Ford, Chevy, Volkswagen, Toyota. A trust is more sort of BMW, Volvo, Audi, Cadillac, Lincoln, if you like your American brands. It's better. You don't need it. Are there times when you're going to be really glad that you have it? For sure. My daughter used to drive 6 days a week from Lower Westchester to Greenwich, rain, sleet, snow, hail. For a while, my wife was driving to Bedford Park Boulevard in the Bronx and then to Greenwich at 5 p.m. every day. We had a Volvo, right? So it's a little situation specific, but it's a more robust planning package.
Yep. We have time for one or two more questions, and then we'll come back through. Can we come all the way to the back and then?
Precedent with if you have beneficiaries on a 401k or on insurance, so you have those beneficiaries, but then you have a will, but then you have a trust. Like, what's the precedent of how things are distributed?
Phenomenal question. I could do this all day and leave out 17 really important things. In terms of when you have accounts or assets that have a title, there may be some way that the account is titled. It may be joint with your sister, it might be joint with your spouse. The title to the account will control who gets it if you die, if it says anything about that. And then if you're the only person on the title, then they will look to see if there's an account beneficiary. Is there a beneficiary designation? And both of those issues will precede or supersede the will. Typically, things are only coming into the possession of your executor if it's not otherwise disposed of by the contract beneficiary on life insurance, by the pay on death designation on a checking account, or by the joint title. You inherit 40 acres in Wyoming from your aunt. It's jointly owned by you and your brother. You die first, it's all his. I mean, it depends on the title and the account beneficiary designation, but it's really important to keep current on that stuff. That's an easy thing to miss.
Okay, so what was their question? Yeah, here.
Is there a suggested, thank you, a suggested dollar or asset amount criteria which makes a trust the way to go, or is there like a lesser amount, like don't bother,
Two ways to think about that. One, and this is just how the world works, welcome to America in the 21st century, the more money you got, the more you're going to appreciate it, right? So certainly for people who are just tripping over their own stacks of money, it's the way you should plan. If you've got $72 million, you're probably not driving a used Honda. But whether you need a trust as you're sort of in more quotidian folks in the room level of wealth, do you see the benefit? For folks who don't have a life partner or a roommate, or whose grown children are not nearby, having a trust is, a nicer layer of protection and gives more guidance. So it depends on I think, a lot about what the what the assets and the issues are. I mean, not to be too in love with my car metaphor, but you know, it's a little bit better protection for anybody. Is it worth the spend up and the hassle? Usually yes, but it's perfectly okay to say, listen, all I need is a will. So it's a little bit of a, you know, think your way through it. I will say sometimes people come to me, they're 33 and they're 31, they have a 2-year-old, they're building wealth. Do they need trusts? It wouldn't be a bad idea, but the main thing is to get the wills done as soon as they can so they have a plan in place. So it depends.
Can I ask, I know we're going to move on. Can I ask one question just about trust versus wills? Does a trust give you more capacity to dictate how the assets would be used relative to a will, or is the trust, or could you put all that in a will and the trust is just more about ease of access?
Anything you might design or plan after you've died could be put into a will or a lifetime trust equally well. You know, create this foundation for school newspapers or learning music, or here's a bunch of money for Alzheimer's research. If you have concerns about the period when you were alive but incapacitated, a lifetime trust will always be much better. So I'm aging up, I have early Alzheimer's in my family, I want to make sure that there's a plan, you know, while I'm in decline and incapacitated. But it's not just about me, because I'm also taking care of my wife who's got this issue, or my in-laws who have this issue, or all kinds of things. That kind of thing will almost certainly be better handled in a lifetime trust.
One follow-up question. The specific scenario I'm thinking about, say you have an adult child who maybe you're concerned that if they received an asset or an inheritance all at once, would not maybe use it wisely? And you are an extended time horizon. So is that what a trust does relative to a will, or can you do all that in a will?
Well, both a will and a trust can say, if I'm not around, or both my partner and I are around, the money's going down to my fabulous 24-year-old, keep it in trust until they're 40. They're on track, they're smart, they're great. But adult onset schizophrenia can happen to anybody. Anybody can have a marriage partner that turns out to be really not a good person. I mean, bad luck and bad things happen to everybody. The longer it stays in trust, the more protected it is from bad luck, bad decisions, and all kinds of things. So, but that kind of thing you can design. I have people who say, yeah, to the kids and trust for life, or half at 25, half at 50. It's a nice way to protect stuff. I'll close on this joke, right? Or at least this portion of questions, is, you know, people come into the conference room and they're like, oh, that's never gonna happen. My daughter's husband is the salt of the earth. They will never get divorced. He's the greatest guy since St. Andrew. And I said, well, let me tell you 3 things that are never gonna happen if you think your daughter's never gonna get divorced. Black US president, legal gay marriage, and negative return on the US Treasury bill. And I can tell you the exact day those 3 things that will never happen all happened, right? I invite clients to have a little bit of humility in terms of fate, Zeus, the working of the Holy Spirit. You just don't know what you're going to have and who's going to be around when the time comes. And you have to contemplate that things you think are going to happen may not be the case, right? So that's a little thing to noodle on. Yeah, well, exactly. Do you know how many people remarry their high school boyfriend? Yeah, it's crazy. But, you know, it is an exquisite balancing act, whether it's your child or your spouse or your parent for that matter, to balance control, protection, and giving them freedom and autonomy, right? It ain't easy. If it were easy, you know, I wouldn't have a job, so.
As part of the way that we're going to sum up all of this really great information, thank you so much, and thank you for the questions that prompted the great information. This is the best. This is what you've got in the flow charts and checklist that were handed out. And it's really just meant to be a way to put in big buckets the kinds of things that need to happen in order to now take this information and make it happen, right? So the flow chart here is really, it's really just that. So the first set of things is to commit, I'm gonna get this done, and to gather your information, right? So that's that first box. And if you flip to the back, that's the set of stuff you gotta gather, right? So that checklist is the list of things that you might pull together in order to get ready to do this work. Once you've got that, then you have the big decisions to make about who your financial power of attorney is, who your healthcare power of attorney is, who your children's guardians might be, successor trustees, like who are your people? So you've got to gather your stuff, decide your people, and then the next is to decide whether you're going to do it DIY or hire an attorney. And those are the big decision pieces on each of those three. And you had another suggestion. What was the other free?
Freewill.com, in addition to Trust and Will and LegalZoom, is also a great resource. There's a little, I remember Cy Sims, the old joke, an educated consumer is my best customer. That's true in this world as well. You should poke around for your options. There are a lot of options.
So those, in terms of cognitive lift, right, those are the big ones. Get your stuff, get your people, and then decide how you want to get it done. But then do it, right? Once you've gotten to don't get stalled. Just keep marching your way through the checklist, get it done. And then once you've gotten those things done, review it and get it to your people, right? So that whoever has your financial power of attorney, that they have that document and that they know it and they know your wishes for it. And then it's in a small box because I ran out of room, but it should be the biggest box. Right, 6 is to celebrate. Like that's a big piece of work that's gotten done to really celebrate it. One thing that can happen, if you've got a trust, you still have to fund the trust, right? So even after you've gotten the trust established, you still have to make all of the arrangements so that the trust gets funded. I will admit that's where I'm at. I'm on number 7 on this list. I'm in the process of still trying to get that trust funded, but that's another set of the process. And then, I'm sorry friends, but it's never really done for all the reasons that we just talked about. Keep that flow chart around because number 8, you really need to review it and come back to it. Life happens, things happen, all kinds of things happen. Things that you never think could happen will happen, can happen. And so it has to be reviewed and returned to. So it can just, if there's a way to, I don't know, like maybe September 14th is I'm going to review my trust day. Change your smoke detector batteries, review your trust, right? So it's just part of the cycle of things. Are there questions about that? This is just to remind you that there's that checklist on the back. Any other questions? As we close out here today, I'm going to just invite you to take a minute here to think about what your next 3 action items are going to be, right? So that you really okay, I've got all this in front of me. I can see where I am in my flow chart. What are the next 3 things that I'm going to do? Oh, I'm going to give you cards. Yes, excellent. We've got index cards. Thank you. So this is your, while you're doing your action plans, if there are other questions, this would be a chance to do that. I know we've got one here. Do you want to add one more question? Yeah, thanks.
I don't think you've asked a question.
I just want to be sure that I understood correctly. I have done all this work, and my husband at the time had a diagnosis of dementia, but he was able to understand everything that he was signing. At this point, I am his healthcare proxy and his power of attorney. When I die, and I expect to probably die before him, maybe not, then my sister becomes it. And he is much less able to do anything cognitively now than he was then. So that still stands. That's my assumption. Okay. And then the other thing is that the beneficiaries do not go through probate. Or do they?
If you have a named beneficiary and they're around, they should take without any need for probate. Did you want to go?
What do you think about the pre-plan, for funeral plans? What's your opinion about that?
In terms of doing a pre-plan for a funeral, it's a little bit like paying for a hotel room in advance. If you keep track of the fact that you have paid for it and you are still going to go on that vacation, it's not a bad thing to do. People will sometimes do prepaid plans and then decades go by and then never use it. That's a risk. But there's not a lot of downside to making arrangements in advance. And you know, if fewer people you have that are likely to be able to take care of that, the wiser it is to take care of it yourself. So it depends.
This is not a question, but it's sort of a heads up. I had a meeting right here. My bank is Citibank right here in the corner with my personal banker last week. And she informed me that our Strongbox, even though I'm a primary signatory and Cynthia's secondary, if I go, no matter what, the contents of that Strongbox go into probate. Now, that's made me rethink the whole thing. In fact, I'm going to go in on a Thursday, meet with my business advisor, and close that thing, because I don't want people to have to jump through those hoops.
I'll riff for a minute on safe deposit boxes. Like whiskey, like computers, like coffee, wonderful servant, terrible master. It's a tool for certain kinds of jobs. If you keep gemstones or coins, it's good to have a safe deposit box. It's not a great place to keep documents. The laws vary from state to state. If you and your spouse are joint owners of a safe deposit box and you die, as I think you were talking about, your spouse or your brother or whoever is the co-owner does not co-own the contents. They just co-own the box. And it happens all the time that people go into a safe deposit box in the bank, they find a will, plans get upended, so courts are tired of that. Bank vice presidents are tired of that. So be very thoughtful about what you keep in a safe deposit box, and do not assume that anything that's in there will be readily accessible. In fact, in some ways, if you like safety, if you like protection, if that's where your crypto key is, right? If that's where the keys to your house, your second house are, not a bad place to keep a thing that will be hard to get to. But that's usually not the case for a will. So that's something to talk to your partner and your banker about. So I'm not against safe deposit boxes, but certainly for the purpose of keeping important documents, I wouldn't.
All right, did we get a chance? Yeah, we can do a couple more. I think we have time for maybe one or two more. These will be our last two. So make sure you've got your action plans
Let me go back
so you feel really ready, emboldened.
I just have a quick question. I was wondering, I might have missed it at the very beginning, but is there anything you can do? Let's say, for example, you have an unexpected, I set up an LLC, sole member, and then I realize 2 days later I have an unexpected medical procedure. Is there anything you can do at home with your will that would allow you to add to the will to somehow protect yourself or protect my wife? In other words, can I do a handwritten note that has a date with 2 signatures on it?
Great question and a good caution. Probably the worst thing you can do, actually, right? If you have a will that is duly executed, 2 witnesses, and then there are handwritten notes on it, that's just going to invite some kind of construction proceeding, and so generally not a good thing to do. It's a little frustrating that the process of will making is so formal, but that's a good thing to avoid, yeah, actually.
My question is, I guess, similar to Chaz's a moment ago, but with the safe deposit boxes, if we hold like all our accounts jointly, everything jointly, does probate interfere with any of that, or is that just go to whoever survives automatically?
Joint assets or joint ownership is good. It does make things for the surviving joint owner faster, simpler, easier. It's automatic. You want to be thoughtful about the bigger, longer picture in terms of what happens after that. And my standard example is you've got this fabulous, 40-foot townhome in Brooklyn Heights, and it's jointly owned, and then you die and your spouse has it, and then your spouse wants to sell it 20 years later, and there's somebody with a whole bucket of money. They started some amazing company. They got millions. They're rich, and they want to close that weekend in cash. And the buyer says, I really want to see the predeceasing husband's, probated will and the letters of appointment for the executor. And the attorneys can say all day long, we don't have to show you that. It's joint ownership. The surviving spouse owned it lock, stock, and barrel. The taxman agrees, the governor agrees, the Archbishop of Canterbury agrees, and the buyer says, yeah, well, I don't agree, right? So it's a good example of where joint ownership is wise and good, particularly among people who have, a life, but it's a good thing to think about probating a will after the fact, even if you don't need to. So the answer is that, yeah, if you have a very clear disposition to a joint owner, that's great, but it may not be 100%. Back to you.
Yes,
we have one more online question, if we can. What happens to debt at the time of passing? So if a person has debt at the time of their death, what happens to that debt?
As we say in high school English class, let's go to the text. If it's a mortgage and it says we get the security of the house, that will always be true even if someone dies. If it's a car loan and secured by the car, probably. Some kind of student loans are extinguished upon death. Most consumer personal debt, credit cards and things, if there's money in the estate, that can and should be used to settle those debts, right? So it's a little bit of asset by asset analysis. If it's secured by property, for sure it's going to get paid. It's secured. Some things you have to kind of look at the situation. But generally speaking, regular debt will attach to the estate, not to the beneficiaries, but to the estate. Right? So you can't inherit debt, but your inheritance can be reduced to pay off debt. That's all I got.
That's good. That's good stuff. So as you remember, this is a series. So this is the first of a series of these. The rest of them will happen online. You can see the dates that are coming up. So what we've got coming at the end of February is one that we talk specifically about end-of-life celebrations and memorial services and that kind of pre-planning for funerals and art shows or however it is you would like to celebrate a life. The 24th, we'll talk about digital legacies, and that includes not just photos, but like who has access to your cell phone, right? Who can get in? Does somebody have the password to your computer? That kind of digital legacies. And then June 5th, we'll talk about the stuff of life, and that just really is the stuff, the kind of Swedish death cleaning, that kind of mode about how to handle just the things, the flotsam and jetsam, the prized possession, all the things that are coming up. As a bonus, you're most warmly invited to the free online community Playdates that I run through Playdates with Death. And our next one is, we always do those on the first Saturday of the month. And our February 1st offering will be an obituary writing group. So we'll I did this on purpose because it will set us up nicely for the end-of-life celebrations that we'll be talking about at the end of the month. So if you'd like to join us online, you're more than welcome to come along, and you can catch us at playdateswithdeath.substack.com. That's those. I'm going to say one more big thank you to all of you, and I will ask that you help me thank George for the expertise and wisdom and wit today. Is there any other housekeeping before we dance it up?
I was just going to say, from a housekeeping perspective, we'll send up a follow-up email. So if you're here today and you didn't register, just come and see me so I make sure I have your name and your email address. We will send up a follow-up email that has the link to the recording of this presentation, links to the documents that we received today. George, could we share your contact information?
Please, yeah.
Yep, Leah, can I share your contact information?
Yes, please.
And share with the links to how to sign up to be a part of the monthly Playdates with Death online community. So we'll send all of that as a follow-up to anyone who's registered here today, so you can follow up with these folks. And I'm also curious, we have another session at the end of February to talk about different things. Would it be helpful to plan a check-in Zoom 2 weeks from now where we just jump on Zoom and say, here's what I did. Here's what I did on my
action item
my
accountability
thing. So that's a possibility. Maybe we'll throw it out there. It's not mandatory, but if you want that accountability of a date 2 weeks from now for somebody to say, so where are you at on your your 3-item checklist, I know it personally helps me to know that, oh, I have to report back to someone that I've actually done these 3 things, so we can certainly look at making that happen as well.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. And thank you both for being here again. Yeah.
Is there any other closing that we need to do? I can't remember what we decided. Is there any other closing we need to do today?
Let's just dance.
Okay, and that's what. So our closing invitation here, at the very least, I hope you'll either sit and shake it out, right, or really dance it out. Either, both, any of the above. Sit and shake it out a little, you know. And I'm going to hit play on this. Peace be with you all. Go with God. And until we meet again, really it's been a pleasure to share and do this work together. We can do hard things together. This is a case in point. And with that, we're going to ideally shake our bagpipes.